intelligent talk that's sure to raise the IQ.
Here's Guy Wehman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio inside the news.
Welcome back to our international segment. This is Inside the News. Glad to have you with us. My name is Guy Wehman. We've got Ben Brunson and Frank Vernuccio. And this is not last year's show. This is 2020. This is the first week of November. And yes, this is a Christmas tree. And I have it up there because I just finished my Christmas album. Ta-da! And so we'll talk about that on future shows. I just happen to have that there. A little product placement. But the world, Ben, they are looking at this and they're calling it a spectacle. They cannot believe what's going on. And then COVID is coming into this with Italy and Sweden. They're seeing numbers going up and some more future lockdowns. But let's talk about the world's reaction to our election, Ben.
Well, if you keep up with the shameless plugs, people will confuse us for Fox News. So you got to be careful on it. All right, look, for a lot of people around the world, and let's just assume that Biden wins, is declared the winner, and it becomes our next president. It is a major victory. We've talked about in the last couple of shows, we were talking about how foreign policy was absent from the entire campaign.
Yes.
Well, the ramifications of a Biden victory are stunningly positive for countries like Iran and China, Russia. These are all countries that, first off, the Biden family has gotten quite wealthy off of. So they essentially have the Biden family in their back pockets. They've all poured millions of dollars. Russia, Ukraine, not Iran, but Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and especially China has poured millions of dollars into the coffers of the Biden family writ large. It's thoroughly documented. The laptop is only the latest document, but you can read all about it before the laptop ever came out. Thoroughly documented by Peter Schweitzer in his book, Profiles of Corruption. And so the pressure on China is going to end. The laptop for sure. There'll be no more pressure on China to fix the trade situation, to improve the situation for American workers. We'll go back to the status quo before Trump, where it's free trade all the time. The pressure on Iran will end. The peace deal that Trump has brought about between Israel and Arab nations, which is based on Trump's pressure against Iran, will probably fall apart, and that process will come to a grinding stop. So there are great ramifications. They're all negative, in my opinion, around the world.
You know something, Frank? Ben hit on something, but the head dude over there in Iran, I don't know what he calls himself, the president, the Ayatollah, whatever it is, he called what we're witnessing now a spectacle. And so that is amazing because it's like, okay, they might be in favor of it, but they never expected something like this out of the United States, which was that beacon of orderliness and, transition goes from one to the next. And for them to call it a spectacle, that's something.
It is, but I want to go back to something you started your last comments on about being like Fox News and product placement. One of the things that observers noticed last night was that in some states where there was 0% of the votes recorded, Fox hastily and readily called those states for Joe Biden. At the same time, in states where Trump had a very substantial lead, Fox refused to call those states for Trump. Now, you're wondering, what's the big deal? After all, what is a network? Has no legislative power. It can't call the state and have that state's electoral votes go to Trump. But there's a factor. If you have enough eastern states called for one candidate, it acts as a discouraging factor to voters on the West Coast.
Yes.
Still have not voted and might decide, hey, you know what? This is over already. Why do I have to get out of my comfortable house and go down to wait online in a polling place when the result is already known? So Fox and the other networks have had a major role in discouraging Republican voters on the West Coast from voting for Republican or conservative candidates by intentionally calling states for Biden using criteria that they don't apply when states are going solidly for Donald Trump or whoever the generic GOP candidate is.
You know, Ben, Twitter was lit up and social media was lit up about what went on with Fox last night. And I don't want to hammer them, but at the same time, social media is all abuzz with this. People are saying, I'm going to Newsmax now. And actually, myself, I actually went to Newsmax last night because I couldn't stand any more of the Fox coverage.
Look, Chris Steyerwald was being quizzed by the Fox anchor people about the early call in some states that seemed very much up in the air, like Arizona. And one of the comments he made was, wow, the polls were really accurate this year. Chris Steyerwald made that comment, which almost caused all the Fox News anchor people to fall over in a dead faint. Yeah. The polls were horribly wrong, and I think fraudulently and criminally wrong. Just right. My opinion. But I'm going to pick on one particular company, Quinnipiac. And in my opinion, I don't have evidence, is my opinion, there's very intentional misrepresentation, and it's done for two reasons. One is when you go through this process and you have polls have huge leads for one side or the other, it tends to channel all the donations to the presumed winner. People want to give money to the winning party, and they withhold it from the party that's headed for a big loss. So that has an impact. And two, of course, it discourages the other side's voters, as Frank just said, from showing up at the polls. And you got to look at Quinnipiac. This is the same company that on the eve of the election win by Ron DeSantis had Gillum up by 7 points and had numerous cases. I think they had Collins down by 15 points on the eve of the main election, where Susan Collins has now won re-election, in large part to hold the Senate for the Republicans. But you saw it across the board in case after case. And Quinnipiac is probably the worst offender, but there are other companies, and they're just acting as political organs at this point. And you have to sit here and wonder, at what point is there some accountability attached to these companies? Because it's, in my opinion, intentional fraud and misrepresentation.
Wow. And that's going to be a cliffhanger right there. We did not even get to talk about COVID and what's going on in Europe right now. And another lockdown is possible. I'll tell you what, if Biden is truly going to be the president, you might as well expect another 8 weeks of a lockdown coming up. And it's going to be in the winter again. It's going to be a repeat of last year. And nobody's going to be happy about that, including all three of us and all of you listening and watching on AUN TV, on YouTube, and our affiliates all across the country. We're going to take a time out. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.